A few weeks ago, I walked into my backyard here in Arizona and I just stopped and I looked around and there was weeds everywhere. And here's what got me. I didn't plant a single one of them. Didn't plant any of them. Didn't water them. I didn't tend to them. I didn't give them any attention at all. But there they were, doing exactly what weeds do, growing, taking up space, crowding out anything good I was trying to build. It's spring, so I'm looking for flowers, right? I stopped there thinking that's not just my yard, that's also the mind of most of the divorced dads I'm talking to. They stop being intentional. Bitterness grows, distraction grows, isolation grows, and the victim's story grows. Not because you planted it, because you stopped gardening. And today we're going to get into the dirt on this. We're going to get into the soil. Um, I'm Anthony. I'm the founder of Divorced Dads of America, the Rebuild podcast. This is built for the bleeding builder like yourself, the man who's rebuilding his fatherhood, his faith, his future, and at the same time, my guest today, very excited, has spent over 40 years growing things, specifically rare plants that thrive in dry, difficult conditions. His name is Steve. He runs Steve's Super Gardens out of Central Coast of California. And whether he knows it or not, everything he knows about horticulture is a direct word for divorced dads. I actually call Steve a Jedi master in gardening. So, Steve, I just want to welcome you to the show, brother. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Yeah, good to be here.
Well, quickly here, those of you that haven't subbed, look, drop a sub, leave a comment, leave a question, leave a review. Why? Because your couple of clicks helps this podcast get to another dad who's dying, who's bleeding out, and just needs some kind of help. So just a couple clicks right now, just do it. Boom, boom, boom. You're helping another dad. I can't do it alone. A million dads transformed. I can't do it by myself. So I want to start with that. I want to lead with you. And you guys are the engine for the growth of all of this. And let me give you the big idea for this show. And then Steve and I are going to dig into the soil here. The big idea today is this weed problem. Weeds represent everything that grows in a man's mind by default, without intention, without watering, without permission. This segment names the enemy and it gives it a biological and a spiritual basis. And my Arizona story can be very much like yours. And I want Steve to explain some of the horticulture we're going to drop into. We're going to dig into some neuroscience. And together, I want you to start thinking about naming your weeds that you're dealing with today. I'm going to give a little scriptural context today, and I didn't forewarn Steve about any of this. I just wanted him to be fresh as a Jedi that he is. So there's a story in Matthew chapter 13, and I've referenced this before, but Jesus tells a story of a farmer scattering seed, and he says, some falls on the path, birds eat it before it roots. Some land on rocky ground. It springs up fast, but dies in the heat without deep roots. Some fall among thorns. The plant grows, but thorns choke it out before it can produce. And some fall on good soil and produces a harvest, some 30 times, some 60 times, and some 100 times what was planted. When the disciples ask what it means, Jesus explains the seed is the word and the soil is the condition of the heart and the mind receiving it. So thorns don't ask for permission. They don't wait for good conditions. They just grow because uncultivated ground is their natural advantage. That's the weed metaphor today for divorced dads. You don't have to plant bitterness. You just have to stop weeding. Some of you know that I dig into the neuroscience as well because I love to see how these things correlate so significantly for you in your life and why it matters. So the default mode network, also known as a DMN, right? It's a set of brain regions. It activates when you're not focused on an external task, when you're idle, daydreaming, or mentally wandering. Neuroscientists at Harvard and elsewhere have found that the brain spends roughly 50% of waking hours in this default state. So in the DMN, the brain defaults to, which guys, I hear every single week, hundreds of you, rumination, replaying the past, social comparison, who's winning, who's losing, when you guys are jumping in and checking out your ex on Facebook or on Instagram, right? And what could go wrong? A self referential thought, which is dwelling on your own story and your failures. This is what DMN is happening. So for a divorced dad who stopped being intentional, no morning routine, no faith practice, no goal, no community, the DMN is running your show. And the DMN does not default to gratitude, vision, or peace. It defaults to the negative, it defaults to weeds. And so I want to dig into this, now with Steve here. And I want to just start from this horticulturist perspective. How does a weed actually grow, Steve?
Well, like most other plants, they grow from seeds, and most of the what people call really ornamental, really preferential things in their garden have been hybridized and they're beautiful and they want them there, but a lot of they've been hybridized to the point where they're a little weaker than weeds. Weeds are like, think of them as like the straight species. Like they are geared to survive, they're geared to get in there and take things over and just, be rampant. So So most of them start by seeds, and most weeds, where a lot of the nice ornamental stuff, the stuff you want in there, the seeds won't germinate as well. But the weeds, wherever they fall and they're not taken care of, I mean, they will grow in rock, they'll grow in soil, they'll grow straight out of spots that the other stuff won't. And that's why it's so easy for them once they get in there to overtake the stuff that you want in there because they're genetically geared to be super hardy. Some of them have actual gel coats on the seed, and they don't even need water to germinate. Like they hit the ground, and there's enough water in that gel coat. A lot of the succulents, the native succulents here in California, probably Arizona, the cacti are geared for that. So they'll sit there and they'll put down a taproot before they ever get any water. So before they even get anything to nourish them, they've already got set and they've got that root going down. So
It's cra-
that's,
it, it's crazy. It's
yeah,
literally it's dry as ever here in Arizona. And again, I don't have any beautiful stuff that's popping up. And even though I planted it, right, it's there. But I want to dig into this scripture next to you. So we got the weeds. They're popping in because that's what they do. They're just there and they're going to pop in. And I want to just unpack this scripture a bit because from your perspective, and we're not going into the super biblical mode here. I just want to hear your lens on a couple of these ideas that we went through. So it says Jesus talks about these seeds falling on soil that's choked by thorns. And I would say the question for you would be, what do thorns literally do to a plant that's trying to grow alongside them?
they they're more geared to keep predators away from them. But what they do is they will prevent the plant from thriving and getting big. The thorns will stick into them. It'll keep them from pushing into that plant. They're basically geared to keep animals from eating them, and from other plants to push into them and overtake their space. So,
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that maybe it's like it got here first, and I'm here
right,
first, and I'm gonna grab what I got and make sure that I got it so that you don't have it.
right.
Uh, so one of the questions here that happens a lot is, what do you see that grows in a neglected garden that nobody planted intentionally? Like, give me a picture of what that could look like after 6 months or a year.
Oh man, yeah. Grass, thistles. Uh, we have things here called puncture vine, which is it's a low growing vine. It's like a three pronged horn seed on it that can actually puncture tires. Um, Grass is a big one. It seeds in, it chokes out everything, and that's probably one of the more rampant ones here. But thistles and grass are both really big, and
That's huge.
yeah, and they'll grow at 3 or 4 times the rate of an ornamental or something preferential or something you want in there. So untended, they overtake super quickly.
They
They're
do.
just they're geared, like you said, they're geared. It's like I was here first, evolutionary. Like I'm way stronger than you. You're really pretty and you look great in here, and this is great. But like I'm tougher and I'm here and this is my space and I'm gonna overtake it unless somebody does something to keep it separate.
Yeah, again, to me, like you talking more about that just reminds me of so many conversations that I have with dads. that are saying, I don't know how to get out of this loop. I don't know. I just keep thinking about it. And, you know, the neuroscience behind it is that you probably have had those loops for a long time,
Yeah.
and it's there, and they've been looping, and you've been tending them, you know, not intentionally, but intentionally because you haven't been intentionally on something else. And I want to throw some of the weeds out that guys will, you know, you're thinking, as we're thinking of grass and horticulture and a beautiful garden, and but then we've also talked about weeds. And I want to list and name a few weeds that I've seen with the dads that I've talked to and what they look like practically, right? So here's some weeds that I've heard dads talk about. And as you're listening, I want you to begin to hear if there's some weeds that you can recognize in your own life. And we'll start kind of this with this awareness. And one of the weeds that I see a lot is bitterness. And it's replaying the marriage, the betrayal, the court, the loss. Another weed that I hear a lot is this victim identity, right? This happened to me. It's not fair. And it's a permanent address for them, this victimhood. Another one is distraction. We talk a lot about scrolling and doom scrolling, and could be sports. Some guys, the distraction, is multi, cleaning their house and making things look so perfect when they're avoiding the thing that they need to avoid. Another one is isolation, a weed. It's pulling you away from friends. It's pulling you away from community. It's maybe pulling you away from church. It's pulling you away from people because you're in guilt, or you're in shame, or you're in fear about a conversation you don't want to have. Another one that I hear is pornography, the most available and one of the most destructive weeds in the digital age. It's literally destroying men of all ages, just from their phone. Another one is idle rage that I hear. It's a low grade anger. It's a low grade anger, and it leaks onto your kids, your coworkers, and your future. There's a guy recently I talked to that his job was being affected, his work was being affected because he had this idle rage. Not crazy, but it was a rage that was affecting his output in all these other areas. These weeds that are come in, and it's like, I'm here first, and I'm gonna take the water, like Steve said, take the nutrients, take the space, and I don't want you to get in there in any way. Those of you that are listening, I just want to take a second here, and I want you to think, what's your weed right now? The thing that grows in your mind, you didn't plant intentionally. If you're on Spotify, drop it in the comments, or on Apple. I read them all. And I'm just curious, what's the weed that you're identifying for yourself? And, you know, uh, before we get more into the weeds, we're gonna jump into the soil. And there's another part in this scripture that we're gonna unpack about soil and the importance of it, because Jesus in this parable doesn't just focus on the quality of the seed. He focuses entirely on the conditions of the soil. And that's where a lot of the stuff that goes back into divorced dads and goes back into our mindset and goes back into those things of, good counsel and good community and having real truth, hard truth, brutal truth, honest conversations about the stuff you're saying to yourself. And the four soil types we'll dig into here for a second. And one of them is just about understanding the diagnosis of where you're at. Right? It was the same seed in this story that Jesus is talking about. Same seed, different soil, different results. And I want you guys to think about the soil of your mind and the soil of your heart, and what things are coming in and what that soil is like, because it's going to give you different results. Again, the story goes like this. It says the seed falls on a packed, hardened path. It doesn't penetrate. The bird comes and takes it immediately. And Jesus is explaining this, that it's the man who hears, but the enemy snatches it away before it can take root. The ground is so hard, nothing ever gets in. There's a dad out there that is a numbing type dad, and he's been through a ton, and he's just built an emotional callus many times. He's in the room, he's at church, he's doing his best at what he's trying to do, but nothing is landing. He's not angry, maybe he's not resistant. He's just closed, armor everywhere. And usually the man who says it's usually the guy that's like, I'm fine, I'm good, on repeat. Right. Soil 2 is the rocky ground. It springs up quickly, but then there's an immediate emotional response. There's no depth. And the roots can't go down because there's rock beneath a thin layer of soil. So sun comes up, right? And the plant withers because it has no root system. We'll talk about that. It's a weekend motivated dad. He's fired up for a few days and or a podcast hits or a YouTube video was exciting, but then it fades and life comes in. And so it's this idea that he gets this quick sprout, but then he doesn't have the roots. The third soil is the thorny ground. The seed grows, but it's surrounded by these thorns that were already in the soil. So as the plant grows, so do the thorns. And Jesus names this specifically. It's the worries of this life, it's the deceitfulness of wealth, and the plant gets choked and it never bears fruit. This is what I call the distracted builder. He's actually doing the work. He shows up, he tries, he has some roots, but he's so consumed with the logistics of rebuilding money, custody, career, the next relationship. Nothing reaches full growth. And so he's perpetually busy and he's perpetually unfruitful, spinning, but not producing. So a lot of guys, they're just running and running and running and gunning and they're wore out. Then finally, there's soil number 4. This is the good soil. It's prepared ground. It takes root. It weathers pressure. It's not choked. It produces a great return, 30, 60, 100 times what was planted. This is what I call the intentional builder. The intentional builder is the man, that you're building toward. He's not perfect. He requires maintenance. He's cultivated his internal environment, though, a faith practice, a community, morning routines, clear values, clear goals, accountability, right? He produces because he is prepared. That's what we're talking about here. So the good soil is something that we talk about in the FAST system in our school group. And we'll talk more about that, Steve, here in a minute. And this is the whole understanding of what's going on. And those of you guys know that the neuroscience, again, I'll say it quickly, and then I want to jump back into digging into this with Steve, literally digging in. But the neuroscience is, what wires together, fires together, guys. So when you think about bad thoughts, negative thoughts, ruminating, things that aren't failure, fear, despair, you're going to wire them more and more and more. You're literally You're watering weeds every time you do that. So when you think and you look in your garden, you look in your yard, some of you guys are yard experts, you know that you need to water the right things and you need to remove the other things. That's what's happening in our minds. That's what the brain is trying to do. And it comes back to you being aware of what's going on so you can do it. So let's look at this, Steve. Let me throw in this way. It says Jesus focused on the soil, not the seed. So as someone who is a Jedi master at growing things, why does soil matter more than just the seed?
Because soil gives the plant that comes from the seed longevity. It gives it the nutrients. It gives it the starting base that's going to make it thrive long term. So you put a seed, it's also going to get it often a quicker start. So you put a seed in a rocky, poor soil, depending on the plant. And it might germinate, it might not, or it might germinate and it'll be really small. It'll be really hard and a lot of work to get up to size and to thrive and to do that. But if the soil is in perfect condition and it's worked and it's ready to receive that seed and to grow, then the seed has everything it needs. It'll take off, it'll root deep, it'll flourish, it'll bloom well, it will, like you said, it will take off and do what it's supposed to do. Whereas, the poor soil just it only cultivates the things that are like we were talking about, like the weeds that are primitive, the bad weeds. They'll get in there. They might grow really well in there, but the stuff that you want in there will not thrive because it doesn't have that base to really take it off and to grow it long term and to reach the potential that you want to reach.
Yeah, if we looked at the 4 soil types, Steve, what does each one of those soil types look like in your nursery, and what would you do with it? So
I would say that
we've got the I'll review here. We have the good soil, we
mhm,
have the hard, we have the rocky ground, and we have the thorny ground.
So the good soil would be probably the tropicals, the lush, the beautiful plants, the ones that are, most people I think want. The rocky soils would be the cacti and the harder, the more durable, but not necessarily the most beautiful stuff that
Yeah,
people
and they
like. The
and they
drought
and man, I
tolerant.
tell you what, you touch a cactus, it hurts, brother.
Right, right, right. Um, yeah, the thorny soil. I guess I would liken that to probably a soil similar to what you would do cacti in, or the thorny things you would do bromeliads, or things that are just super, super hardy that might be thorny themselves.
Yeah.
They need that drainage and need that poor soil and a little less of that nutrient. Um, and then the fourth one, refresh my
I think of like a hard path. Like imagine you threw seed on like concrete.
that one would be for probably for the hardest growing plants. There are some plants out there that they don't need rich soils. They don't need nutrient rich, and sometimes that soil might be 75% rock, and it might be really poor rock, and that's how they grow best.
Yeah.
And if so that's what would go in there. So the richest, best soil is going to grow what you would mainly walk into a nursery and people would think, oh my gosh, those are amazing, and those are going to be the biggest sellers and the most beautiful and the lushest. And
Yeah.
as you get into the rockier soils, it's going to be the harder growing, the tougher stuff, the stuff with thorns that people aren't quite so attracted to, but they grow much better in that poor soil because they're geared to do that.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed in that little scripture context is that on the hard stuff as well, it's also prone to get eaten by things that come around, which can happen as well, which is interesting. But I want to throw this question your way about what would I want to get this transforming idea, right? So imagine somebody hands you a plot of land and it's genuinely bad soil. It's hard, it's depleted, maybe it's choked with weeds, right? What's the actual process of rehabbing that? What would you do? What would it take?
Well, it would take adding to the soil, building the soil to sustain what you want in there, and initially removing the process of removing the weeds and whatever you don't want in there away, and slowly building the soil over time so that it can nurture and can grow the right stuff in there that you want to grow in there as a good crop. And eventually, if you get the soil right and the ecosystem right, it will naturally sustain itself. You'll have the stuff you want to thrive in there. The weeds won't grow nearly as well. You won't have nearly the insect problems or the disease problems. But it's kind of a longer process. Some people will, um, put soil amendment directly in there and do it. Others, it's more of an overtime thing where they'll do composting and stuff like that. But it's about changing the soil and changing the crops and getting what you want in there to grow and to take over, so that that in itself keeps out the undesirable stuff that you don't want, the weeds. And then they don't, once it's in a spot where it's growing really well and the soil's right and everything's thick, then the weeds don't come back in nearly as well.
Yeah,
So it's changing the whole structure of it.
what I'm hearing there, Steve, is that somebody goes on a weekend warrior 3 day trying to change their soil. And what I'm hearing is that it's going to take a little bit more time than a few days to get the soil right so that you're growing the right things in your mind. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's going to be a few seasons of work.
Yeah. So those of you listening, like I want to give two sides. I don't want to like crush you that it's not going to happen overnight. There's going to be some progress in transforming. And as you know, it's right around the 21-day mark to change a habit. We're talking about your mind here from the soil into your mind. It's 63 days to transform a belief in your mind. So again, it's not going to be a weekend warrior moment for you where all of a sudden these things change. However, it will be something that you'll see in a couple of weeks and a couple of months of where that soil begins to change and you're now able to have some of these, like Steve was saying, some of these great types of plants and beautiful things that you want in your garden, and the garden starts replicating the good things as opposed to just weeds all the time. And I want to throw this one back at you, Steve, because um, Which just from your from where you're at, as being a divorced dad and maybe some of the thoughts that you have around this, which of these four soils do you think most men are sitting at right now, post divorce, post crisis?
I would say post divorce and in the state they're in, I would almost want to say either the super rocky soil or the hard pan soil. I feel like it's sometimes just judging from my own brain and
Yeah.
this process and where I've come from. It I thought I had really rich soil and was growing the right things, and then in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I really let some of those weeds get in there and take over, and it ruined a few things. Um, and then in this state of just stress and anxiety, I think I find that I would say most of it is hard soil. It's really hard to start working on that soil, and they've got the wrong things in there, and to cultivate the good things, and it's like a block, I guess, is how I would liken it. The way that the soil's hard, and it just is it's really difficult. You lose hope, and there's emotions that just overrun. I think a lot of the divorced dads. I will say that for myself. Um, and there's just a lot of times you just feel like my brain just won't function. Like I can't cultivate anything. Like nothing will grow in there.
Yeah.
I can't move. And then other days I feel like, okay, I'm working the soil a little looser here. I'm doing this and this is going. And like I said, it's a constant process. But I would say for me, especially, it's the hard soil
Yeah.
to get stuff
I
to
would
take up.
I would say too, with the hard soil versus something that is just rich, nutrient dense soil. And I'm just saying this because I remember my youngest, maybe she was in first grade, and she brought home a little bean in a styrofoam cup,
Mm.
you know, and they were doing these beans, and she next day she's like, "Where is it? Where is it?" And it took I don't know, it took a few days. I don't know if it took a week. I'm not an expert, but it did not take overnight or a couple days. It was a few days to get some green to pop out of that soil. And when I'm hearing you say that, Steve, it reminds me of, so many dads have gotten crushed and they're trying to find some glimmer of hope. And when you're in a nutrient dense environment of a plant, it seems like to me, it's not going to be an overnight hit. It's not going to be the next day for some of this stuff. The hard stuff, the hard soil, you might get a little sprout that comes up really fast, but it's also not really rooted dense to be able to withstand anything that it needs. And it's not going to be super beautiful like you really want or imagine. So when you say that stuff, see, Steve, what I hear, and I think a lot of the dads feel, is they want some quick wins. But the reality is the quick win is them taking the time to create the right soil for them to grow something that is as beautiful as they imagine. Does that sound about right?
It does. I think one thing it kind of makes me think of too is I think especially the dads who've gone through their life, like you said, there's weeds we've carried for our whole life, the cycles that we just have never really paid attention to. And we soil is one of those things, it constantly has to be built. Like people think, oh, you just dump liquid fertilizer on it. Well, those are just chemicals, but really the best way to build your soil is you continually put compost, you continually build the actual structure of the soil. So
Mm.
I think a lot of us have, I know I'm guilty of it. We've gone on for years and there's these cycles and we just kind of numb out like, oh yeah, and we don't pay attention and we don't really realize that that soil is starting to break down and it's starting to not be so rich anymore until that security system is gone and we're faced with something like this and then it hits you and you realize it's like, wow, my brain plasticity, my soil, I've let it deteriorate, I've let it degrade, and now I don't have the soil that I need to really just process this and move forward with it. And that's when they really have to start working. I know I do have to be like, wow, these are like, I've got to learn some new skills and I've got to get this going again and start cultivating this and start getting the right plants in there to go. So I think it was like a realization for me too. And the longer I go, the more hindsight I have. I'm like, wow, that was a really, that was a big weed that I glossed over and I just like, oh, it's fine. It won't, whatever. I didn't think it was a big thing. And now in this situation, I'm like, oh, yeah, now I have to deal with that weed and it's big. And instead of just pulling it out with my fingers, I'm going to have to get something pretty major to get it out of there and get the soil back working. It's going to take some time, and it's 10 times as hard as it would have been if I had, maybe paid attention to it earlier. So it just
Yeah.
makes you really, really aware of all that stuff in there that you've neglected. And that now, if you're like, oh man, I've got to deal with all of this and figure this out and that out, and basically redo the yard because it's just kind of, or the garden space, because it's just crashed. So
Yeah. But I guess from your perspective, like if we're looking at it from this way with, weeds and dirt and things like that, what does it feel like to know that, okay, what's happening here is very similar to what happens in the garden. And I need to kind of revitalize this soil. And I'm aware of weeds, I'm aware of soil, and I'm also aware of what great soil can do in your life. So if you looked at that from your perspective, Steve, even in in your own life, like how does that make you feel about what you're building out for your life?
it it makes me feel I'm having more and more moments where I have a lot of positivity, where I'm like, okay, this is going to be better, and I'm going to do this. It's kind of daunting to realize that,
Yeah.
to think, oh, wow, there's a lot in here that I'm going to have to switch out. I'm going to have to redo. Um, so I look forward and I'm like, it's going to be a project. It's going to be a big project,
Yeah.
but it's
But
going to
is
be
it
worth
is
it.
it okay knowing that, yeah, is it okay knowing that because you know what happens in the garden when you do that. Like you've done that before and you can see and you can put your hands in the dirt and just feel the difference of the soil when it is just literally energized. And if you look at that process and now you're looking at it for your own life, do you see that as something to say, "Hey, I've done this before, I can do it again?"
Yeah, yeah,
Does
I
it does
think
it give
so.
you any types of hope or, just sort of a plan of like, "Hey, what am I really looking for here?"
Yeah, it gives me hope. I have to say that, there is that sort of component of mental block that makes it hard to pin on to that exact vision. But it does give me hope knowing that, yeah, I've totally done this before, but now this has like really forced me into seeing what was wrong in the ways that I did it before.
Mhm.
And so this next garden is going to be even better. It's going to be spectacular, but it's going to take some work to kind of get past the stuff that is in there and to redo the new.
Yeah. Yeah, good. I wanna jump into another little horticulture moment with you here, and again, there's another verse, a little context of scripture, and I'm gonna put it to you for your overview, but the big idea of this is called pruning, and pruning is the hardest idea to sell to a man who already feels cut down, right? He's just, like, feels more crushing. The truth of it is that pruning isn't punishment. It's very precise. It's redirected energy, and a plant that is pruned produces more, not less. And so this scripture in John 15, those of you guys that need some reading, John 15 spells it out like this, and then I'll dig into it with Steve because he'll probably have some really cool stuff on this as well. But Jesus says, "I'm the true vine, my father's the gardener, and he cuts off every branch that doesn't bear fruit. While every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful." Uh, so he's cutting off dead branches, but he's pruning live branches, redirecting energy for greater fruit. So it's sometimes the stuff's not working and sometimes it is working. But Steve, I want to dig into this to you specifically about pruning. And because the dads listening, myself included, when we hear this idea of pruning, we probably feel like God Almighty, we've lost enough. Or what that feels like, or what that is. And I just want guys to hear a little bit about pruning because when you read that, there's some positive things of pruning. So if we jumped into like the biology of this pruning aspect, Steve, um, like when you prune a healthy fruit bearing branch, what is actually happening to the plant biologically? What does pruning do that just letting it grow doesn't?
Well, eventually that branch, it will produce so much that it will use a lot of energy, and a lot of plants they'll stop producing fruit on that. Grapevines are really great. I love vineyards out here, and every season you'll see them prune back to the nub. It's because they will reset heavier fruit on that new growth. Whereas if you leave that growth on and let it grow for the next year, you'll have half the crop. So it actually it regenerates is what it does. So
Mm,
it does take out the dead wood. It takes out the stuff that is no longer needed, that's weighing it down, that might eventually cause disease or further problems. And then the fruitful branches, it actually puts energy back into them so that they will fruit even better the next season. So it's yeah, maintaining both sections, definitely getting the bad out, but getting the fruitful parts even more fruitful by paring them down so that you can re-up that energy and just even bigger the next time.
yeah. So what I'm hearing, Steve, here is we got these two branches. One's dead, and we're cutting that thing off. One is growing lively, and we're still cutting that one back. When I hear what you're saying, and I'm hearing this through this, divorced dad lens, dads are feeling a lot of that. They're feeling like there's been probably some dead stuff in their life that's cut off. And there's also
Right.
some stuff that was really awesome that's been pruned. And I guess if we look back, and I'll throw this question, for you and just be curious where you land with it. What would you say to a plant or to a man that's been cut down to almost nothing and doesn't know if he'll grow back?
Oh, I would say it will definitely grow back thicker, stronger. You're still going to have to, watch out for the sprigs that are off and, you don't want, and keep the deadwood out of there. But sometimes it's very common. I see it in a lot of landscapes where all the time I'll see plants, especially ornamental grasses, and for some reason around here they don't trim them to the ground like they should every year.
Hmm.
And so they just become this bigger and this bigger kind of mass, and they just kind of keep shaping them. There's all this dead stuff in there that you take a plant like that and you shear it off at the base, and it comes back in this new, pristine form, even better than it was. It's basically a regeneration. So I feel like events like this, it's really it's like a cocoon. It is like it's a transformation, and sometimes you do need to be almost all of it cut back so that you can regenerate all of it in the right way, or the majority of it in the right way, the way that really should be. Because it's
Yeah.
just gone so long. It's just gone so long that there's so many different things wrong with it, and there may be a lot that's beautiful with it, but there's so much intermixed with it that just isn't feeding the process, that you just shear and go and start again, and you will regrow better than you were before.
Yeah, it's heavy because
It's
it's
heavy.
heavy because we're talking about plants, but it's real because you and I both know that, these things are th- I'd say they're happening for us. And there's a lot of dead things, and there's been a lot of guys that have lived a long time, and they've never had something or someone come into their life and say, "This is dead weight, and these are areas we need to prune it back because you need to grow bigger." And when you get to your, 40s, upper 30s, you think you've got it figured out, and you think everything is rolling just the way it should. And you've never had these audits or these checks or these balances on your garden or on your life. And so when you're hearing this about pruning, you're maybe hearing this as like, good God, like this isn't what I wanted. This is not, I don't, and then when you look at a tree or a plant that's been pruned, it doesn't look very pretty. I mean, my next door neighbor has this giant tree that finally got cut back, and I look at it now, I'm like, it's not that great, but after a couple
Yeah.
months, man, the thing is looking a lot better. So Steve, one, it's good to hear from your side that, man, this is very similar to what dads go through and they feel, and there's a reason, there's actually a positive side to it. Dad's listening. There's this scripture, this whole thing in John 15 where It's literally talking about these specific areas in life about being pruned and that there is growth attached. I want to give a couple pictures of pruning for dads that are listening of what this could look like practically. And then I'll jump back in here with Steve for just another couple of things before we kind of run this thing out. So one of the areas of pruning could be this victim narrative. It's the story that positions you as what happened to you and not who you're becoming. A pruning could look like relationships that reinforce your worst version, the guys who are also drowning and pulling you down. I know a lot of guys that say they want to live at this higher level. However, their entire social circle is living at this tragic, toxic level. And it's something that needs to be pruned. The habits you built for your life that you no longer have, there's a pruning there. Routines, spending, spending money, spending time in places you don't need to spend time, patterns, that were old patterns that they don't serve you anymore. And they definitely don't serve this guy that you want to become. It's a pruning. There's this anger toward your ex, not for her sake, because it's consuming energy that belongs to your kids and your future. It needs to get pruned. There's this passive consumption that hours of scrolling, gaming, watching just doing everything else you need to do. It needs to get pruned. And these are things that you don't want to do. It could be attacking your life. It could be bringing somebody into your life or getting coaches or whatever that might look like to literally prune those areas of your life, because it's not punishment, it's redirection. And it's like what Steve said, it's regeneration is what's really going on. And it's painful and it hurts and it doesn't look pretty. That's ultimately what we're looking at this pruning tree or situation or a vine, right? It's one of those areas. And I just thought to even the dads, like, be the person in your own life that recognizes that there needs to be pruning for regeneration. Be that type of person and the awareness for it. And I want to put this last part here toward you, Steve, because you built an entire business around rare drought tolerant plants, right? That they thrive in difficult, maybe low resource conditions. And that's a statement that a lot of dads hear in their own life, that that's the scenario that they feel like it's a desert, it's difficult, it's hard, it's not tropical, it's not paradise, it doesn't feel
Yeah.
rich in the soil. These are all things that I hear from thousands of dads every month. So, a man who rebuilds after divorce with intention, faith, and systems, and they have that culture, right? So that their culture is bringing them forward instead of bringing them back. Um, why has why have you specifically, focused in on these drought tolerant plants? And what draws you to the plant that can thrive in hard conditions? What was it?
I think, in all of my years of experience, I like a lot of plants. And I love the tropicals. I love the exotic stuff. I think part of it was moving to a Mediterranean climate where resources like water are pretty limited for long periods of time. Um, and so those plants are the ones that thrive best here. And I kind of defaulted to becoming, the exotic succulent and cacti guy. I grow bromeliads too. But I think what really attracted me to them, prior to living in California, I wasn't so into those kind of plants because they weren't appealing. They weren't like you said, tropical or flashy or oh, it's a palm tree or it's a banana tree. Um, but then I started to realize it's wow, there's a lot of beauty in those plants and the hardiness of them. So, not only are they environmentally responsible, but they're tough and they can endure. And it's really cool to be able to show people who think that you can't be, plant can't be tough and beautiful at the same time. So there's vast amounts of these types of plants that people aren't really aware of. And there's, not all cacti, there's a lot of proteas and Australian natives that grow here that are pretty amazing and super drought tolerant. So I think that's the durability of them, and then getting into hybridizing new ones of those and even better ones is that's what drew me to them is the hardiness and the fact that they're so durable, especially in this climate.
Well, what I hear there, Steve, is one is what you're dealing with exactly where dads are. I mean, and you said something, they can be strong and beautiful, which is amazing. And you said something else which I thought was really cool, is that they could regenerate and
Yeah.
they can reproduce. And so what I'm hearing as well, and this is the whole thing with Divorced Dads of America, is transforming a million dads for their life and their legacy. That is a regenerated, plant per se. It's been pruned, it's been chiseled down, it's got new soil. And because of that, not only are their lives transformed, but their kids now are in an environment that they're aware to, and the soil and and those kinds of things. So let me throw this at your way, because I want to give you a shot here to throw something at some divorced dads. And I guess it would be, if you could leave one thing with every divorced dad listening today, a seed, a principle, something they could do for themselves this week, what would it be?
I think I'd start by saying the one thing that I've learned in my life, and I'm sure everybody's, the divorced dads are realizing this, is that the absolute hardest plant to prune is yourself. It's, to take that and say, I have to cut this off. This is so comfortable. These friends are my security, but you know, the support of sending 5 funny little memes. How you doing? How you doing? How you doing every morning? It's like it's not helpful. So to prune yourself is absolutely, I think, the hardest thing. Um, and I am, I'll admit it, I'm, in the early stages. I have days where I'm barely functional, but I think that it is it's worth the process because I'm having some breakthrough moments where I will prune some things that are really painful and just be like, I just can't let go of this. It's just, and then it's just like, you've got to. And so I cut it off and it makes space for something. And I'll have these breakthrough moments of beauty where I'm like, wow, okay, this feels so much better. And this is a better thing. And that's a better thing. And it's a slow process, but, it's a necessary process.
Yeah.
And I
When you
think just start with something, a part of it, and prune and just see how that feels, and then the next one. But there's going to be a lot to prune, and I think different guys will have different amounts of pruning. Some may just need to be. I feel like right now God is just cutting me off at the base, honestly, to restart. So it's yeah, it's I guess that's what I would say is that I get it. The hardest part is to do that to yourself, but it's necessary to make it through, and it's necessary to make it way better and to be what you want to be on the other side.
Man, when you were saying that, I watched a movie recently, and I say this to a lot of dads I talk to about, getting surgery. And when you're given that visualization of pruning, it's painful and it hurts. And I think of the same thing with surgery. And it's like, who wants to go and perform surgery on themselves? Nobody, man. Who wants to
Yes.
rip yourself
Mhm.
open,
Yeah.
stitch that thing up, and try and do that? And so, one is, people don't want to get into that pain to do that, which is a lot of times where they bring someone like myself on to kind of help work that pain through. Another thing is to realize there's also this pain of staying the same, and there's this pain to change and transform. And you're going to feel pain either way. And so
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say here is, it's like, take the pain of the transformation, of the regeneration, of what this plant could look like, of what this tree can do that, because the pain to stay the same, you're still bleeding, you still got these cuts and things. You got to stitch them up. You got to get this stuff out of you. You got to do those things. And I also look at it too. It's like, do you want to do that with by yourself, or do you want to get a professional to kind of handle those things, for you and with you, to do it faster and make sure you're cleaned up and make sure you're going in the right direction. So there's so many like pictures and visuals I have when you're when you're giving that call to dads, that they also have to see and be like, hey, you know what? This might not be a job, you know, for myself that I'm going to go and cut myself open and stitch this up. This might be something where I need to, get some help, get a professional, get somebody who's going to lead me on this journey in that way. Because the other thing that came to my head there, Steve, was there's this pain. You could have somebody that cuts themselves because they don't like their life, but then you could also have somebody that's cutting themselves because they want to heal their life. And there's two different scenarios of that same cutting. There's ones that are I don't know if I want to live, and I don't know if this is where I want to be. And then there's the other side to it that's saying, hey, what if I stitch this thing up and it's going to hurt, but I'm going to be able to take care of my kids and what's next and those things. And so I think there's a lot of pictures coming to my head right now. Those of you listening, I just want to challenge you to sit with that and sit with what pruning is and sit with the fact that most of you are wounded and you're injured and you're hurting and you're trying to DIY a lot of this stuff and you're trying to patch up a wound that you don't really know how to do it. And you're doing it by yourself. And I know that because I just did a poll where 96% of the dads I polled were doing it by themselves. So I know you're doing it by yourselves. But you would never do that if you were physically injured. You would go and you would get the necessary help to get the wound, clean it up, get everything out of there, and make sure that you can then heal faster and grow faster from it. So I'll throw this your way, Steve, and then we'll close this thing out. Steve, for 40 years, man, you've been growing things, rare things, drought-tolerant things, which is amazing. Just like most of the dads here, that they feel that they're in this state of a desert. Today, you gave divorced dads some great language of what they're walking through. A weed, and I want to leave everybody with just some of these things here. So just listen closely and carefully, and we'll get into what Steve has to say as well. A weed doesn't need permission to grow, like we said. Doesn't need you to water it. Doesn't need good soil. It just needs you to stop paying attention. But the man you're trying to become, he needs intention. He needs tending. He needs you to show up in the dirt on the days when nothing looks like it's growing yet, because something is. In Galatians 6, it says that you'll reap what you sow. It's not a threat, it's a promise. And the question is, what are you sowing right now in the season that nobody sees? So I want to throw this back to you, Steve. Where can guys, where can guys find you and the work that you're doing and the stuff that's happening for you? Where can they find you?
My website, stevesupergardens.com. That's my main website. I have an Instagram account. That's where I'm posting a lot more videos, and things like that. Uh, would honestly like to get more into helping people with plants and gardening, just like we were talking, like, as a metaphor for their life and like the healing and the differences that it can make in your life. So that's my two main things are the Instagram and the website, which is the plant nursery. Um, and I think it's like I said, it's nearly impossible to prune yourself, to make yourself prune yourself, especially in the state of mind that we're all in right now. And I do think that, yeah, and I know it's difficult because a lot of people don't feel like they have that outside support. Like I don't have family here. My friends are really busy, so you do I try to do most of it myself, but I'm starting to realize that that's not really sustainable. I think it is. I think getting coaching and having somebody that is really outside of your brain that can look at it from an objective point of view and help you is super important.
Well, sweet,
So
dude. Sweet. Thanks
yeah.
for sharing that, man. Guys, listen, follow Steve, buy his stuff on his website. You need plants, get them. Um, man, he's just support him. He's in the middle of everything that you guys are going through. He's showing up to grow things, which is awesome. And that's the kind of man we're all trying to become. So if this episode hits you in any way, follow the show on Spotify or Apple, share it with one dad, and come find us at Divorced Dads of America on Instagram. It's a community being built for men exactly like you. And guys, I'm going to see you on the next one. Keep building. God bless you.